Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. Welcome to the expository teaching of 2 Kings chapters 3 and 4. So glad to have you with us this morning. If you're joining for the first time, you can belong before you believe. I hope that you guys are having a blessed day, and I hope you're ready to wake up with the Word of God. Please let me know where you guys are tuning in from, because what's so beautiful is that the Lord brings people from all around the world, and he does it every day. So let's see, where is everybody tuning in from today? New Jersey, England, Oklahoma, Canada, Maryland. Oh, I was born in Salisbury. Idaho, London, New Mexico, Texas, California. I was born in Salisbury, and I currently now in Austin, Texas, London, California. Wow, come on. Pulaski, Tennessee. South Florida, absolutely incredible. Louisiana, Uganda, and Amesbury. I think that's in the UK, I'm pretty sure. But we're going to get started with prayer, and then we are going to get started here shortly. Let me take off my hat. Dear Heavenly Father, all graceful, all loving God, all merciful God, Lord, just thank you for another day. Thank you for waking us up today. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to be able to open up the Word of God and let the Word speak to every single person who's going to hear this. Lord, give me the strength this morning, as I am just a weak vessel for you, Lord. I just want us to seek you with all of our heart, just to be guided towards you, just to grow in a deep relationship, a deep reverence for you, Lord. Let that happen today. Let's understand the one who lives within us and works through us, Jesus. That is you. And Lord, we love you and you love us. I say this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Okay. 2 Kings chapter 3. And then we'll go into chapter 4. So what we do is we do the verse by verse reading, and then we'll go into the actual teaching. And then as the Holy Spirit speaks, from whatever comes from it, if there's a stop, if there's something, then I will stop and we'll be able to speak on that. So 2 Kings chapter 3, verse number 1. Now Jehoram, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel and Samaria the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, and reigned for 12 years. And he wrought evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and his mother, for he put away the image of Baal and that his mother had made, or his father had made. Nevertheless, he cleaved unto the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not therefrom. Ameshah, the king of Moab, was a sheepmaster, and rendered unto the king of Israel 100,000 rams with wool. But it came to pass, when Ahab was dead, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. And King Jehoram went out of Samaria the same time and numbered all of Israel. And he went and sent Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, saying, the king of Moab hath rebelled against me. Wilt thou go with me against Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I am thou art, my people as my people, and my horses as thy horses. And he said, which way shall we go up? And he answered, the way through the wilderness of Edom. So the king of Israel went, and the king of Judah, and the king of Edom, and they fetched a compass 7 days' journey, and there was no water for the host, for the cattle that followed them. And the king of Israel said, alas, the Lord hath called me, the 3 kings together, to deliver them into the hand of Moab. But Jehoshaphat said that there is not a prophet of the Lord, that we may inquire of the Lord by him. And one king of Israel's servants answered and said, here is Elisha, the son of Shaphat, which poured water on the hands of Elijah. And Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Edom, went down to him. And Elisha said unto the king of Israel, what have I do with thee? Get thee to the prophets of thy father, to the prophets of thy mother. And the king of Israel said unto him, nay, for the Lord hath called these 3 kings together to deliver them in the hand of Moab. And Elisha said, as the Lord host liveth, before whom I stand, surely were it not I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would not look toward thee, nor thee see. But now bring me a minstrel, which is a harpist. And it came to pass, when the minstrel played, the hand of the Lord came upon him, and said, thus saith the Lord, make this valley full of ditches. For thus saith the Lord, ye shall not see the wind, neither shall you see the rain. Yet the valley shall be filled with water, yet you may drink, both ye, your cattle, and your beasts. And this is but a light thing in the sight of the Lord. He will deliver the Moabites also in your hand. And ye shall smite every fenced city, and every choice city, shall every good tree, and stop all wells of water, mar every good piece of land with stones. And it came to pass in the morning, when the meat offering was offered, that behold, there came water by the way of Edom, and the country was filled with water. And when all the Moabites heard that the kings came up to fight against them, they gathered all that were able to put on armor and upward, and stood in the border. They rose early in the morning, and the sun shone up on the water, and the Moabites saw the water on the other side as the red blood. And they said, this is the blood, the kings and the surely slain, and they have smitten one another. Now therefore Moab to the spoil. When they came to the camp of Israel, Israelites rose up and smote the Moabites. So they fled before them, but they went forward, smiting the Moabites even in their country. And they beat down the cities on every good piece of land, cast every man his stone, and filled it. They stopped all the wells for the water, and felled on the good trees, only in Kir Harash, left the stones thereof. Howbeit the slingers went about it and smote it. And when the king of Moab saw the battle was too sore for him, he took him with him 700 men that drew their swords, to break though even unto the king of Edom, but they could not. Then he took his eldest son that should have reigned in his stead, and offered him a burnt offering upon the wall. And there was a great indignation against Israel. And they departed from him, and they returned to their own land. All right, we have a lot going on here. We're going to get into it. So in chapter 3, Jerome was a bad man. We do not know when or why Jerome removed that idol. Perhaps he did it to put please, because Elisha helped the king on several occasions. Now, so Jerome was not as bad as his father, who was Ahab, and his mother followed a false religion. Earlier, Jeroboam had set up images that were like young bulls. And what are we seeing here? We talk about the ripple effect is because when one person does one thing, right? So as you don't transform something in your life, or you don't bring God into your life, Romans 12, don't be conformed, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that transformation happens with God, not by yourself. They were in idolatry. Idolatry will follow through. If you have something as an idol, and you hang out with friends who have idols, you will transfer that, and you will continue to find those groups of friends and those relationships everywhere that you go. We have to be very careful of that. Moab's king Mesha had to pay a very large tax to Israel's king every year. When Mesha rebelled, Jerome's older brother Ariah did nothing. So Jerome, however, prepared to attack. He asked the king of Judah to help him. Now the king of Judah was King Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat was a good king who was loyal to God. But Jehoshaphat had established a close relationship with the wicked king of Israel, who belonged to Ahab's family. So Jehoshaphat's son Jerome married Athaliah, who was Jerome's sister. In the end, this close relationship with this wicked people caused great troubles in Judah. So the two kings agreed that they would be on the same side. Their armies would be united in the battle, and they made their plans for battle. But they intended to attack Moab from behind. Judah's king advised Jerome to go through the desert in Edom. This would mean that they would ask the ruler of Edom to help them. Well, it seems that Judah controlled Edom at that time, so there would be three armies to oppose the army of Moab. See, the armies expected a couple different things. They expected to find water, but the stream in the area was dry. They were very desperate. There were three armies and many animals, so they needed plenty of water. Now, the king of Israel was afraid. He thought that the Lord had decided to act against Israel of Judah and Edom. He thought the Lord had arranged the armies to be this hopelessness of a situation. When they were weak, the army of Moab could defeat them easily. So the king of Israel, without hope, but the king of Jehoshaphat was not without hope. You see, he probably realized that his action has been very foolish, and he agreed to support an evil king in battle. Now, Jehoshaphat had taken his army into a desert. That was a dangerous place for a large group of people to be. In addition, Jehoshaphat did not ask the Lord for advice when he did all of what he did. So Jehoshaphat made many mistakes, but he was still loyal to God. And Jehoshaphat trusted God. And Jehoshaphat knew that God was kind. He is pleased to help his people, so he wants to forgive. So at last, Jehoshaphat was ready to ask God for advice, as a servant of Israel's king told the three kings that Elisha was there. So God had arranged his servant, the prophet, would be there to help them. So the kings went to see him. But by this simple action, they showed that they were humble. Usually a king would order a prophet to come. But these three kings went to Elisha's tent. So now you have Jehoshaphat, who is saying, okay, well, I need God here. I'm going to humble myself as a king. I'm not going to invite the prophet. I'm going to go to the prophet. How many of us are thinking that God is going to come to us, but we don't humble ourselves to go to God? When you humble yourself in front of the Lord and you seek the Lord with all of your heart, you're not waiting for God to come to you. You're not waiting for God to bless you. You're going and you're saying, all right, Lord, I'm going to seek you. I'm going to seek you with all of my heart, lean not to my own understanding, submit to you in all of my ways, and you're ultimately going to make my path straight. But we have a lot of people that are like spiritual couch potatoes that love to just sit and wait, thinking that God's a genie in the bottle and he's going to answer all of your prayers. Like he's going to answer everything that you ever ask for. James chapter 6, verse 1, it says, faith without works is dead. Because faith works when you work on faith. So Elisha did approve that Jehoshaphat was the king of Judah, and Jehoshaphat, like Elisha, worshiped the real God. Now, Jehoshaphat was trusting God to help him, so Elisha explained that he would pray on behalf of Jehoshaphat. Elisha asked a musician to play that would make Elisha's soul quiet, then he would receive God's message. So Elisha began to pray, and then he felt God's power upon him, and God gave him a message for the kings, and God would do two things here. Firstly, he would provide plentiful water for them and their armies and their animals. Secondly, they would win the battle against Moab, and the water would supply proof that they would win the battle. They would overcome Moab completely, and the things that would show the kings that the Lord is only the real God. So Elisha told the kings and ordered the soldiers to dig the ditches for water. In Jerusalem, the priests offered the first sacrifice daily soon after dawn. At the same time, water came from Edom into the desert, where the armies were camping. However, nothing else showed that it might have rained. Perhaps there was a storm in the mountains that were in Edom. And the result was a sudden flood. You see, it was a great relief for the armies when they got the water. Soon afterwards, their success in the battle would be even better news for them. See, water came early in the morning. It's funny how we talked about digging wells in Isaac and going from the living water, and then God brings us right into chapter 3 that also talks about digging ditches for water. Listen to this. They thought that the water was blood. They imagined that the three armies had fought each other. See, the people from Moab hurried in to take goods from the camp. But then their enemies, the Israelites, attacked them. The Israelites chased them back to Moab into their own cities, and the Israelites destroyed the city. See, they made it possible to get water. The people in Moab could not dig the ground either because of the stones in their fields. The Israelites did not destroy the city called Kid-Harshet, which was the capital of Moab, but they surrounded it and they attacked it. The king of Moab tried to escape from the city. Perhaps he hoped to persuade the king of Edom to help him, or perhaps he thought that Edom's army would be weaker than other armies. But the king of Moab failed in that. So he was very desperate. So he took his oldest son, that son that would have been the next king of Moab, but the king of Moab killed that son. And in public, he did it on the city wall for everyone who could see, including the armies. That was how the king sacrificed his oldest son to his god called Shamash. Now the king of Moab hoped that in the way he could get help from his god. But it was a very terrible thing to do. It frightened the Israelites so much that they went back to their own country. Perhaps they were afraid of Shamash might be able to do. Perhaps they were afraid of what God would do as a result. The king sacrificed his own son to his and fake believing god, Shamash. And then what that did was it actually made the Israelites scared, because they were scared of what God was about to do. Let's go to chapter 4. I think chapter 4 is pretty fast. Oh no, it's about 44 verses. Okay, 2 Kings chapter 4. Now there cried a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, Thy servant, my husband, is dead, and thou knowest thy servant did fear the Lord. And the creditors came and take unto him to my 2 sons be the bondmen. And Elisha said unto her, What shall I do for thee? Tell me. What hast thou in thy house? And she said, Thine handmaid hath not anything in the house save a pot of oil. Then he said, Go borrow the vessels abroad in thy neighbors, and even empty vessels borrow not a few. And when thou art come, and thou shut the door thee upon thy sons, and shalt pour in all in these vessels, and thou shalt set aside which is full. So she went from him and shut the door upon her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. And it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said unto her son, Bring me yet a vessel. And she said unto her, There is not a vessel no more. The oil stayed. And she came and told the man of God, and he said, Go sell the oil and pay thy debt, and live thou and thy children to the rest. And it fell on a day that Elisha passed to Shunem, where was a great woman. She constrained him to eat bread. And so it was that as often as he passed by, he turned thither to eat bread. And she said unto her husband, Behold, I now perceive that this is a holy man of God, which patheth us continually. Let us make this little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall. Let us set him for there a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall be, when he cometh to us, that he shall turn into thither. And it fell on a day, and he came to thither, and he turned into the chamber and lay there. And he said to Gezi, his servant, Call this Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said unto him, Say now unto her, Behold, thou hast been careful for us with this care. What is it to be done for thee, while thou shouldest spoken for the king or the captain of the host? And she answered, I dwell among my own people. She said, What then is to be done for her? And Gezi answered, Verily, she hath no child, and her husband is old. And she said, Call her. And when he had called her, he stood in the door, and he said about this season, according to the time of his life, Thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, Nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thine handmaid. And the woman conceived and bare a son, that the season that Elisha had said unto her, according to the time of life. Now when the child was grown, it fell on one day, and he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said unto his father, My head. He said unto a lad, Carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him, he brought him to his mother. He sat on her knee till noon, and then died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of the God, and shut the door upon him, and went out. And she called unto her husband, and said, Send me, I pray thee, one of the young men, one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God, and come again. And he said, Wherefore wilt thou go to him unto this day? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, It shall be well. And then she saddled a donkey, and said to her servant, Drive and go forward. Slack not thy riding expert for me. I expect, I bid thee. So she went and came unto the man of God in Mount Carmel. And it came to pass, when the man of God saw her far off, and he said to Gezi, his servant, Behold, yonder is that Shunammite. Run now, I pray thee, to meet her, and say unto her, Is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with thy child? And she answered, It is well. And when she came, to the man of God to the hill. She caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to thrust her away, and the man of God said, Let her alone, for her soul is vexed within her. And the Lord hath hid it from me, and hath not told me. And then she said, Did I desire a son, my Lord? Did I not say, Do not deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, Gird up thy loins, and take my staff in thine hand, and go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not. If any salute thee, answer him not. Again, lay my staff upon the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he arose and followed her. And Gehazi passed on before them, and laid the staff upon the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Wherefore he went again to meet him, and told him, saying, The child is not awakened. And when Elisha come into the house, behold, the child was dead, and laid upon his bed. And he went in there, and shut up the door with the twain, and prayed unto the Lord. And he went up, and lay upon the child, and put his mouth to mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands. And he stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. Then he returned and walked into the house, for he went up and stretched himself upon him, and the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi, and said, Call the Shunammite. So he called her, and when she come into him, said, Take up thy son. And then she went in, and fell at his feet, and bowed herself to the ground, took up her son, and went out. And Elisha came to Gilgal, and there was a dearth in the land, and the sons of the prophets were sitting before him. And he said unto the servants, Set on the great pot, and seeteth the pottage for the sons of the prophets. The one went into the field, and gathered the herbs, and found a wild vine, and gathered thereof wild girders, and his laps full. And he came to shred them into the pot of pottage, for them that knew. They poured them out for the men to eat, and it came to pass, they were eating from the pottage, and they cried out and said, O thou art man of God, who is death in the pot? They could not eat thereof. But he said, Then bring meal, and he cast it into the pot. And he said, Pour out for the people, that they may eat, and there was no harm in the pot. And then there came a man from Baal Shalisha, and brought a man of God, bread of the first fruit, 20 loaves of barley, and full ears of corn in the husk thereof. And he said, Give unto the people, that they may eat. And his servitor said, What should I set this before 100 men? He said, Give the people to follow, that they may eat. For thus saith the Lord, They shall eat, and they shall leave thereof. So he set it before them. They did eat, and they left thereof, according to the word of the Lord. Wow, what did we just see happen here? What is something that really opened your eyes that we see happened where the child was literally dead? And then Elisha comes in, and not because Elisha does it, it's because the power of God is with Elisha. And I think there's something that continues to follow through with the teachings that we go through, from Isaac and the well to continuing to see about the father and the mother of her child, is that continuously we will see that it's not because of the person, it's because the presence of the Lord is upon the person. We must always remember that. So Elisha, number one, provides oil for the widow. There's an old story that a widow had been the wife of Obadiah, and he had hidden 100 prophets so that the king Ahab would not find them. So perhaps Obadiah received money from the other people to feed the prophets. And then he would have to pay it back to them. That is the story, but we cannot say whether it is true. Jesus himself said that there were many poor widows in Israel in those days, Luke chapter 4, verse 25. And we can see that very many people were poor. Wars were frequent in Israel, and the rulers were evil men who did not hesitate to steal property from the poor people. But on several occasions, there was not enough food for all the people, so the people had to obtain loans in order to afford food. Now, if people could not pay back those loans, they or their children might have become slaves. And that is why the widow became so desperate. You see, many people are desperate, but they still do not ask God for help. I'm going to say that again. Many people are desperate, but they still don't ask God for help. You'll go to your friends or your family or your relationships or whoever it might be, but you don't want to ask God for help. But this woman had faith in God. Her husband had been loyal to God, and she too trusted God to help her, so she went to Elisha. He was the prophet for whom God had appointed to Israel at that time. So she trusted that God would give Elisha the power to help her. Elisha replied to the God's message to the woman. God would help her. She only had one small jar of oil, but God would use what she had. Beautiful. Hear this. She only had one small jar of oil, but God would use what she had. Don't think your current circumstances of what you have that God can't use it for his good. Like the most beautiful thing, he can take the smallest thing and he can do the most amazing work with it. Like with a willing vessel, with not a lot of things. You don't have to have everything that everybody has, guys. You don't have to have a ministry, a nonprofit. You don't have to have all these things that people see. You don't have to have the technology or any of those things. You can literally just have the will of God in your life. You're a willing vessel for the Lord. And the Lord will use you beautifully. So Elisha told the woman to collect small jars for her neighbors. He told her to fill those jars with olive oil from her small jar. Then she could sell that oil and she could pay her debt. She would also have enough money to live on. See, this miracle is something like Jesus did in the New Testament. See, he fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. God has enough resources to help us all, so he can supply whatever we need. The widow believed what Elisha told her. She obeyed his commands. God supplied what the widow needed. He used the small amount that she had and it increased so that it was sufficient to deal with the current situation. So many times we'll look at our own situation and we're like, well, yeah, I just don't see a way out. That's because you're trying to see a way out. If you bring God into the situation and bring God into what you're going through and say, well, Lord, I don't see a way out, but I know you do. So I'm all ears. I'm giving it all to you right now. Let's go, Lord. Let's see what you can do. And watch how God comes in your life and works in your life. Shunem was a village that was a few miles north of Jezreel. So it was between Samaria and Carmel. Elisha often traveled this road and it went through Shunem. Now, a wealthy woman invited him to her home for a meal. He visited the woman and her husband very often, so they decided to build an extra room. So they built it on the roof of their house, and Elisha wanted to show his thanks for the woman's help. He asked if he could speak to the king or the officer of the army, and perhaps they would gift a gift to her husband. But the woman refused that idea. Later in chapter 8, she did need the king's help, though. So Elisha asked his servant how he should reward the woman. The servant was called Gehazi. Elisha was the servant of the prophet Elijah before Elisha became a prophet, so Gehazi could have become a prophet too. In the end, Gehazi will disappoint us. We'll see this in chapter 5, verse 20 through 27, but here Gehazi answered Elisha well. Gehazi realized that the woman did not need any human help. She needed the help that God would only give. She needed a son, and that was because her husband was old. It seems that they were unable to have a child, so the woman's husband might die soon, and then she would need a son to provide for her. God gave Elisha a promise for the woman. In less than a year, the woman had a child. We cannot always do something to help people, but we can pray for them. In that way, God can supply the things that they need. How many times are we trying to do something, but really we should just be praying for that person? Do you know that God can do more with a prayer than he can do with your words? And a prayerful person is a powerful person. A prayerless person is a powerless person. Right? So many times I will ask somebody and I'll say, hey, how's your prayer life? It could be better. I hear that over and over and over again. And it's true. It can always be better. But are you praying daily? Are you praying without ceasing? Are you praying in the situations? Are you praying for communion with God? Are you actually going into prayer? I think we think when it comes to praying, if God doesn't answer your prayer right away, guys, this is not a transactional relationship, right? It's not like I do this so I can get this. It's a relational relationship. Meaning it says to pray without ceasing. That means you be consistent in your prayers. So you consistently continue to pray over and over again. And even if the prayer is not answered, it doesn't mean you stop trusting in God because he didn't answer your prayers. Exactly, Tamara. Help us, Lord, not seek earthly rewards. Help us seek heavenly treasures. So Elisha asked his servants how he should reward the woman. So suddenly, the child became ill, and soon afterwards he died. So the woman's action in this passage were very unusual, but they show her faith. So God had promised that she would have a son, like Abram or Abraham. She trusted that God would bring about that promise. She had faith even when the situation seemed impossible. So the boy was dead. But the mother did not bury him. She was to fetch Elisha. And earlier, Elijah had helped the son of a widow in Zarephath. Perhaps this woman from Shunem had heard about that. Well, then God was with Elisha, as at the same time God of Elijah, and it was seen that the woman realized that. Her husband asked her why she was going. It seemed that his faith was never going as strong as hers. His religion was for special occasions, for example, Sabbath days and festivals. Oh, what's up, Anna? But she wanted to serve God at every opportunity. She told her husband that everything was all right. Of course, her child was dead. But she insisted that everything was all right. She said that because she was trusting God, God made promises to her by this prophet. And she knew that God is able to perform his promise. You see, I'll have these conversations with people. And I remember this one conversation that I had with a pastor, and man, this might make me cry. His son had cancer. His son had cancer. This guy's a pastor, runs a church. You know, he goes. He has a congregation. He preaches to them every Sunday. His son had cancer, and I asked him. I said, "How are you doing, brother? How are you doing?" And he says, "I'm doing good, man. I'm doing great. How are you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm just asking about what's going on." He said, "Oh, it's in God's hands. It's in God's hands." He told me something there that changed the way that I looked at it. Anytime somebody of a doctor or somebody gives us something, he said, the doctor gives the diagnosis, but God's got the prognosis. And I was like, oh. And if it's in God's plan, it's in God's plan. I love my son, but I love God. And I was like, wow, okay. I mean, that's good. So it's understand when you get something. I've heard story after story after story after story of like, well, the doctor said this, the doctor said I was supposed to die in 4 years, the doctor said, and then God miraculously, I'm here 10 years later, the cancer has been gone. I mean, my dad had colon cancer, and then that was cured in 2.5 years. Like, what can happen when you put your faith in God is beautiful. When you have people praying over you, and you have like a tribe. There was a lady that she was going up a ski lift, and she had this double scarf on, and she got attached to the ski lift, and it broke her neck in 3 places. Pulled her all the way up the ski lift. What happened was she had a near-death experience, and then she saw this light in this forest, and she was walking towards this light. She had no idea what this is, but she said she felt love and care and joy, and she felt this light, and she was getting closer and closer, and then she realized that it was a person. And she said that it was so beautiful, it was so loving. And then this person started to speak to her and asked her, do you want to go back? You will tell this And yeah, my internet just went out for some reason. I'm sorry, guys. And nobody had any clue. But what happened was her neck healed faster than the doctors have ever seen, and they had no idea what to say. And then now she has her story in that place, letting people know the power of God. It's actually a beautiful story. It's a near-death experience on YouTube. But we're going to get back to this. So the boy was dead. The mother did not bury him, but she went to fetch Elisha. Earlier, Elijah had helped the son of the widow of Zarephath. Perhaps this woman from Shunem had heard about that. The God of Elisha was the same as the God of Elijah, and it seemed that the woman realized that. So her husband asked her why she was doing it. It seemed that his faith was never as strong as hers. His religion was for very special occasions. But she wanted to serve God for every opportunity. She told her husband that everything was all right, and of course the child was dead. Now the journey from Shunem to Carmel was 25 miles long. The woman's servant made the donkey move quickly. Elisha sent his servants to discover what the problem was. The woman replied with a statement of her faith. She did not want to talk about her problem. She was trusting God. Elisha did not know what the problem was. So God did not tell everything to his prophets. See, the prophets were only human. They did not know everything. And then that woman spoke, and the woman said to Elisha that she had not asked for a son, and she had also told him not to tell lies to her. The woman did not explain her problem, but Elisha understood. She was reminding Elisha about the promises that God gave to her. See, that is the promise, that she would have a son. And Elisha saw that it was necessary to act immediately. Elijah told Giza to run up. He must run to Elisha's stick on the child. The stick was something that showed Elisha's authority. Perhaps Elisha hoped that the action would bring the boy back to life. But that did not happen immediately. And then Giza showed a serious lack of faith. He did not continue to pray. Perhaps he already decided that the situation was hopeless. He left the body and he returned to Elisha, and Giza told Elisha that the boy was dead. But Giza had done what Elisha had told him, but Giza had acted without faith. You know, in James chapter 2, verse 18 says, good actions without faith achieve nothing. When Elisha reached the room, he spread himself upon the boy. Elisha did similar things in 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 21. These actions may seem strange to us, but they show a desperate state of prayer. At first, the boy became warm. Then that showed that it was starting to become alive. Then the boy sneezed, and it showed that he was alive. God had answered his mother's prayer. We shall read more about this in the family of 2 Kings chapter 8, verse 1 through 6. Now, Elisha was probably teaching the men from the group of prophets when this event happened. See, they didn't have enough food. See, that this problem was affecting the entire region round of Gilgal, so the men had to eat whatever they could find, including the wild plants. One man picked a poisonous wild plant by mistake. And then the man began to eat the stew, meat, vegetables, and liquid which someone had cooked all together. It tasted awful, so the men realized it was poisonous. Elisha added flour to the stew. It did not hurt them any longer, but the flour did not do a miracle. It was the Lord who did it. He had provided for his people in their difficult situation. And barley is the first harvest of grain in Israel in the agriculture year, and it was the first barley from the harvest. And there was an ancient tradition to give the first of everything to God. We call that the first fruits. By that means, a person shows that God has the first place, which is the most important in his life. It seems that this was a special harvest. It was probably came after the period where there was not enough food that we read about in verse 38. This man wanted to thank God for his harvest, so he baked him barley into loaves as he traveled to Gilgal in order to give it to Elisha, the man of God. But listen to this. Elisha did not keep the food for himself. He wanted to use the food in order to show God's kindness to other people. That is what you call a selfless servant of the Lord. He was given something, but he said, no, I want to give this to God's people. So Elisha ordered his servant to give the food to a group of prophets. These loaves were small. 20 loaves were not enough to feed 100 hungry people, but they all ate. Some food still remained. And this story is just like the time when Jesus fed the 5,000. They too, everyone had enough, and some food still remained. You can read that in Mark chapter 6, verse 30 through 34. In his words and his actions, Elisha is very like and much like Jesus. Elijah was like John, who prepared for Jesus' arrival that we read in Luke chapter 1, verse 17. That is 2 Kings chapters 3 and 4. We ended off a little early this morning because we started a little earlier. I hope the Lord spoke to you in such a beautiful, incredible way this morning in his word. I'd love to learn what you guys learned. If you learned anything that really spoke to you, anything maybe you're going through right now. And then I will see you guys all tomorrow on the podcast.